welcome to I'm Ready to Talk, where we have honest conversations about faith, about healing, about relationships, and real life. So, today's episode is the Boundaries Edition. Woo. So, we're talking about something that a lot of people struggle with, okay? Setting limits, saying no, protecting your peace, and not feeling guilty for needing space. Yes, we are. We're talking about today. So, if you ever felt drained or ever felt emotionally tired or afraid to disappoint people, then this conversation is for you. So, today I am joined by a very special guest who will help us talk through boundaries. Yes, she will. And so I would like to introduce to you all Dr. Karmen Williams. I am so glad that she's here. And she is going to give us a few details about herself before we get into our topic for today. Dr. Karmen.
Well, thank you for having me, Miss Tamesha. I am Karmen Williams. I am by profession an assistant professor in public health, and I am a lifelong churchgoer. And so, definitely a person in the faith. Been in this for a little while.
Okay, awesome. So glad to have you. So, what made you say yes to this conversation on boundaries?
I think it's for one, it's good to remind myself about boundaries, and so having the
Mm,
conversation with good people and friends, and really talking about what that means as you move forward every day. And because this is good, because I am yet struggling with said boundaries in a lot of ways. I think it's gotten better. So I have a few ideas on like how to potentially help us out, but then also thinking about how to move it forward even at this phase.
gotcha. And I can relate to that. I have some things that I may have issues with, some boundaries at times. I can be guilty too. So, why do you think so many people struggle with boundaries?
I think it's a lot of things. For one, I think we are big people pleasers. Like we don't want anybody to look at us
Ooh,
bad. We're not dependable, or we take on this idea that dependability equals saying yes to everything, or
mm,
you want people to like you. You do. You don't want anybody to think, oh well, they're just selfish. They don't want to help me out or anything like that. We don't want to be seen in a bad light, and so we equate saying yes to everything as a way to do that.
gotcha. I got you. Boundaries are really, they're talked about a lot, like we're talking about them tonight, but I believe that many people still feel guilty when it's time to actually set them. Like when it's time to actually set them, like, oh, I don't, like you just mentioned, I want them to like me, or I don't want to be disliked. I don't want to feel like, I let somebody down or disappoint someone. Oh my gosh. So we'll start with some foundational questions. What are healthy boundaries really meant to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Healthy boundaries are really meant to not only protect yourself but protect others. It's to say, I'm here for you. These are the things that I said. It creates, there's this idea of balance, but also harmonization within yourself, within your relationships. It really helps keep everybody healthy. Like you know where I stand, I know where you stand. I think about like even in the word, it talks about the idea of having write the vision, and I know I'm using that a little liberally, but like really, like these are my set, this is what I'm where I'm standing, this is what my vision is for this situation. And I'm gonna make it clear, so that we all stay in the same place. But ultimately, it's healthy because it tells you where the line is for you. You don't go too far, but then you also don't let others go too far either.
Absolutely. I love that you said it makes it healthy for each party so that the other person doesn't become reliable on you every time. And so that helps them to actually grow and to actually learn. Some folks can actually learn how to do something on their own if they have a boundary set. Like if you always come through, they always know you're going to do, you know, like we can just use this and say, pay their light bill or something. They're like, oh, she's going to pay it. I don't have to pay it. I can. I can just depend on her, but it puts them in a position to be responsible, and it doesn't allow them to be unhealthy with taking care of business. Okay.
Absolutely. And how do you
When
grow? How do you grow? How do other people grow? If you, I think about that in the church for sure. Like,
mm,
the same person reads announcements for 35 years. When is it time for that next person to train to read the announcements?
wow.
Or, that kind of thing. And I'm not talking about anybody because I don't know. But I'm
Just
just
general.
saying, like, yeah, yeah, in general. Yeah, when you think about mentorship, it really is about bringing up the next person and up the next generation. So the thing about boundaries is it gives you the ability to do that as well. It gives you the ability to say, okay, well, this is where my boundary is, but you should create some that are healthy for yourself. Um, so it's a lot of different things involved there.
Gotcha. Absolutely. I want to ask you this question. Why does saying no often feel so uncomfortable? Why does that feel so uncomfortable?
It's it does. I go back to the first one because we don't want to say no to anybody, and I think it goes back to what we equate the lack of boundaries with. We equate it with that's how you show love. You equate
Mm,
it with that's how you show that you care, and that's not what that means at all. Having balance and things like that is more important than somebody thinking that because you said no to them that means that you hate them. It can't be that extreme. It really cannot be.
wow.
So it is uncomfortable because we've grown up in that. We've and a lot of things tell us that's what it is. You think about on your job, if your boss tells you, or asks you, can you stay late? And you say, well, no, I have something tonight. Then now you're not the reliable employee anymore.
Mm,
Or, same thing in your family. Somebody asks you to do something. No, I can't do that today. You can't never do nothing. And despite all the things that you done
I'm about to
done,
say that. I'm about to
right,
say that. If you the ones that you've done for 100 times, you don't do that one time, you
one
ain't never
time.
there. Lord help us. But
We
that's true
turn people
though.
into brats, and I mean we're brats too. But it's like we turn people into brats when we say yes to everything.
My
Um,
gosh.
so it's
My gosh.
uncomfortable. We want to give and do for people, but it's yeah,
Mm.
it can't always. I mean, sometimes it is unhealthy.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you. So I want us to talk about also now some more emotional and relational questions that would be relating to this particular topic. And so, what happens emotionally when someone has no boundaries? What happens?
Yeah, it's clear, and like I say, I'm experiencing some of it now.
Uh-oh.
I think I have said yes to so many things professionally that I
Mm,
am now like, where am I? What do I need to get done today? So emotionally, I am mentally, I can tell I'm starting to get mentally drained.
mm,
I feel the pressure almost like something's sitting on me. Like it feels heavy when that
mhm.
happens, or you feel stuck. Maybe there is something else you want to do for yourself, but now you have obligated yourself by saying yes.
Wow.
I was talking to somebody and they just told me this like yesterday, and they were saying, it's the thing about saying yes is now you become obligated for all the things that comes with a yes. For example, friend asks you to take them to the airport, and you say yes, but you still have to take into account that you have to make sure your car has gas in it. You have to make sure
Mm,
that you have the time available, that you get up, you have to get dressed. You still have to make sure that you could get back. You got to find out, what time. And all they have to do is get ready and be at the curb. So it's like you have now obligated yourself for the whole setup
mm.
of this yes. And so
Wow.
yeah, so having those, it's it is a burden of sorts when you say yes. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but you could see the emotional burden when it's too many. It's too many.
Right. I completely agree with you. It actually falls into this other question. How can lack of boundaries lead to resentment, burnout, or frustration? And it does. And so if you want to answer that question, you feel free to do so. But how does it lack of boundaries lead to like resentment or burnout? Because it will. It
It
will.
will. Yeah.
Or frustration.
It will. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's easy to shift the blame. So that's where the resentment
Mm,
comes in because it's like you have obligated yourself to this yes, but now you're like, well, if they had just done this right, then I wouldn't, um,
Right.
you become resentful for the fact that when I say yes to my family about things and then the day actually comes, sometimes I'm like, dang, I was gonna sleep in today. I forgot I gotta take. I was so here.
Look, this was my one day to sleep in, and here you are needing me. My goodness.
Exactly. So it
Woo.
it does. It can bring up those feelings of resentment, and burnout is a real thing. Like I was saying, too many things on your schedule. Like you already had something scheduled, but you didn't check it,
Mm,
and now you add in more things. So you got to figure out where that goes in your already busy schedule. Definitely,
wow.
which leads to frustration. People still asking you questions when you could just say no. You still like, let me see what I can do, and so it
That's
becomes,
so popular. Let me see what I can do. Let me
yes,
see. That's so popular. Oh my gosh.
it is.
Woo. So here's a more personal question. Okay. All right, Carmen. What made boundary setting difficult for you at first?
Yeah, it's like I say, it's still a work in progress for sure. But I think
That's honest.
initially, yeah, initially it is it. I am one of those people. I did confuse and do sometimes confuse the idea that like sharing my love and showing my care is by saying yes to everything and being available and being reliable. As one in my family, I'm the middle child. I'm the, and middle child, and like not just with my parents and my siblings, but also within the bigger family, like within the
Mm,
cousins. So I'm I always been the one, connecting with people, making sure everybody is good. And so it became this like persona of, I'm responsible for the care and the well-being of my family and my friends.
mm,
I'm even in the health field. And so even that idea, like I worked in the hospital, I am responsible for the care of these people. And so I think in a lot of ways, it was this thing like I felt responsible. I felt like I had to say yes. I had to be available. I had to make sure everybody else had what they need. Now, what
mm.
I did not see was that I was forsaking my own self for, for the fact of making sure everybody else was good. Carmen wasn't good.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, I can relate to that. Even in my family, we have a big family too, and so I'm the one that may host, the family events for the holiday time, and so everybody comes here, and that's no problem. I love that time with my family, but it also is, on you. The house got to be clean. Got to make sure we got all the food. Make sure we don't run out of food. All of these kind of things, and so I can understand that where you feel like you want to make sure everybody's good, but then I'm wore out after it's over. I'm like, I'm tired. And
Absolutely.
so I can relate to that. My gosh. Ooh, what changed for you once you started setting healthier limits? What changed?
Yeah, and this was tough, but it was something I recognized. I think for one, not only did I have to start saying no, I had to accept the fact that I did say no, so let it go. I think
Mm,
I wanted to make myself feel really guilty about not saying yes to everything. And so once I started, saying no, setting those limits to say, okay, Carmen, like, look. So one of the things I did, and this kind of like goes into some of my encouragement, but one of the things I did was I have a schedule. So I have a weekly schedule. I go through every week and I say, these are the things I need to get done.
mm.
It became abundantly clear, Carmen, on Tuesday, you have 25 meetings. You
Jesus.
cannot, no, not really, but you cannot add this project on this day. You are already jam packed. So I think seeing how busy my schedule really was and how many things I already had on my plate made it be so much easier. So just that simple, just visualizing the fact that you literally do not have time to add anything else into this schedule. And so once I started doing that, it did. It changed. It made it a lot easier to just say, I just really don't have time. And I think that once seeing, like literally seeing that I could not do it if I went to sleep that night, if I wanted to, be able to function the next day, there were just things I could not do, which forced me to having that like clear visual forced me to set these healthier limits. And so, yeah, I have seen a reduction in the burnout. You know, I've seen a
Mm.
reduction in the frustration. I've seen a reduction definitely in the resentment because I can't be mad at anybody but myself.
For me, Carmen, I actually would have more time when I started setting boundaries, like you said, having a schedule and saying, I do this on Mondays. I have to make sure at this time I don't have time for XYZ because this is for my Mondays, or my Tuesdays. And I don't even really have no off days, but when I do get one, I'm like, it's gold to me. So
Yeah.
like, let me keep my off day. And so, but I have time, I have more time when I set those boundaries. So I like that you said that as well. So these next questions are going to be talking about family, church, and relationships. And so I want to ask you, how do boundaries work in friendships and romantic relationships? Ooh, those are
Yeah,
tough questions.
they are.
That's a tough question.
It is. I always felt like friendship should be easier because it's like, here it is, your friends, they know, depending on the type of friend, like they know everything about you, you know everything about them, you guys are really close. So you should be able to like easily give those boundaries. But we find that is one of the tougher ones to have boundaries with. And I think for some of those same reasons, yeah, friendships feel like they should be the easier ones to navigate. But I think that's where we find that it is really tough because it's like, well, this is my A spoon. Like, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I want to tell them the truth, but I'm also, mindful that, it is what. So, but true friendship is telling the truth. It is, putting it out there. Listen, like, this is where I'm at with this, being upfront about it can really make for a healthy relationship, make for a better friendship for sure. I
Mhm.
think romantic relationships, same thing. I think it should be at the forefront, but it becomes hard. You love this person. You
Right?
just want all you can for this person. You just want them to feel good. All this thing. So it's like so boundaries can be tough, and I think especially at the beginning of romantic relationships, like a lot of people are, we're and I want to say, you want to put your best foot forward, and so you're like, well, I don't want to like make them feel like they can't approach me or they can't, say what they need to say to me. But that's really the time when you should be doing it. When you should, at the beginning is when you should be saying, "Hey, this is like my boundary. This is where I stop," or I don't, I'm looking at my schedule. I don't have time for this today, but let's schedule some time to hang out on Saturday. Um,
Right. I
so
even before my marriage, let me say that before my marriage, I had another, previous relationship where I had to set a boundary in the beginning as well and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, and this is what I don't allow, in the very beginning. I had no choice. And so I agree with you completely on that. You have to set boundaries in the beginning for romantic relationships.
you do. And it's again, I say that it is a and I hate to keep saying it's tough, but it's the kind of thing like you don't want to again, you don't want them to see you in a bad light or view you in a bad light. You're very cognizant that you like this person, so you want them to like you. And so you tend to say yes to things more. But yes, setting those boundaries, not only will you respect yourself in that relationship, they will respect you as well.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. What do healthy boundaries look like in church settings where people are expected to always serve? Hmm.
Yeah. I know. This I thought about this. I know a person, I'll say it that way. I know a person who she's unmarried. I'm also an unmarried woman, and so it's this concept that unmarried women, and the Bible does say that unmarried women's service should be to the Lord. That should be their focus. That's what they should be going towards. Absolutely. And I think in some ways that's been interpreted that they belong at the church 24/7, that everything they should do should be should be at the church for the church. And I just don't believe I just don't believe that's necessarily what that means. But um, I think that has been, because that's been interpreted that way. Um, a lot of boundaries get crossed, and not just with unmarried women, but I think there is this idea that, you should really be, whatever the church needs you to do, you should just do.
Mm,
I I think there's a lot that can go into this. I think there is um, healthy boundaries, working within your giftings,
mhm,
definitely being led by the Holy Spirit to do the things that He tells you to do. By all means, if you can help, help when you can help, but understand that you still have a life. You still gotta have make a living. You still need to have your own personal relationship with God good. All of these things still go into the fact that you are serving in the church or serving in ministry. And so just keeping a lot of these things in mind. And it goes back to the whole thing. What, balance. I think God is a God of balance. He's a God of time. He's a God of 6 days He worked and then He rested.
mhm.
So it's that is the type of God we serve. And so understanding that this should go across the board. It should go for church or service in church. It should go for our relationships. It should go for our family. It should, all of these boundaries are good for every aspect of our life, our job. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. A scripture that I like to, one of my favorites actually is Galatians 1 and 10. And King James Version, it says, "For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please
Mhm.
men? For if I yet please men, I should not be the servant of Christ." And so when we're talking about serving at church, sometimes, like you said, it's not a good balance between the two for someone that they feel like has so much time and they need to just be here all day 24/7. It's like, no, I have to do what God says first. First, it doesn't matter. That trumps everybody's opinion about what they think I should do. And so, definitely for the listener,
Mhm.
if you're listening now, to encourage you, if you feel like you're in a situation like that, that you should always focus and strive to please God above men. That's what I hope to encourage you with. Yes, indeed. Yes,
And if you
indeed.
have the time and the desire, be in church as much as you want. Serve, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Sir, you want to be there
absolutely.
24/7, be there 24/7.
Yeah,
Yes.
24/7.
I'm with
Absolutely.
you. I'm with you. I'm with you. But be there if God told you to be there 24/7.
Yes,
Jesus.
absolutely.
Which brings me to my next question. So, are boundaries biblical? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I actually wrote a scripture, Titus 2:12.
Ooh, come on.
Yeah, and that scripture kind of goes into this idea of self-control and responsibility, and how boundaries help us manage our lives rather than like controlling others. So thinking about biblical stewardship and our personal responsibility and what that means in all aspects of our life, but definitely thinking about how it goes with serving God, and things like that. I think about, there are things in the Bible that talk about how to deal with situations. And so I think, just like other situations, same thing with thinking about boundaries and having respect for one another as well as ourselves. I do believe that the Bible is full of that type of word and that encouragement in our lives. There, one example was like Jesus sets boundaries. He went and he prayed. This was one example I was looking at.
Mhm, mhm,
He went and prayed. He said, "I just need you to sit over here." The disciples, just sit back here, hang out for a second. Let me just take some time to be alone. Definitely thinking about, managing his time with how he served God. Like, they talk about how one of the trips with the disciples, it should have only taken a couple of days, but he was like, we need to stop in this town over here. So managing his time with the idea of God's work and what God had for him to do. Even like choosing when to engage with crowds. Like I think about the story of the woman with the issue of blood and how, she reached out. He was just walking through, so it's like I think about all of these things, and we could definitely take our guidance from Christ and how he how he walked on this earth,
mm.
and think about those. He was a kind person, but he knew when I need to step back, I'm stepping back. So
Right.
Yeah, definitely thinking about those kind of things.
Absolutely. And adding to that, boundaries are biblical because, listen, God never called us to live without wisdom. He never called us to live without discernment or limits. And what it does, boundaries really help us love people, as you said. You like Jesus did. He loved on people, but he didn't not do what he was supposed to do at the same time. He didn't lose himself. He honored God. He still honored God. And so we're called to do the same, that we don't have boundaries so out of whack that we don't understand how to continue to honor God in everything that we do, and get so sidetracked with trying to please other people, as we just mentioned on with Galatians chapter 1. And
Mhm.
so either way, just encouraging that, don't feel like that you can't, have a boundary and feel like you're not going to do something that God told you to do. So that's all I got to say.
That's great.
So I want to ask you another question on faith and healing. How can boundaries be a part of healing and wisdom?
It's a great question. Thinking about boundaries, and when I think about healing and wisdom, and how boundaries can be healing. We hear a lot of stories, just in general, about people when they finally told their family they're not gonna, and I'm saying it all with a no tone, but boundaries can be yes, like there is this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to start do, but this is as far as I'm going to go with this. Something I meant to say earlier too, boundaries also is a fence.
Mm.
And so having, this idea of a fence around you, it not only, helps you to know, and I did say something like that, but it helps let you know how far to go, but also protects you from a lot of different things. And so
Mm.
that's the part of the healing and wisdom that comes, that this particular boundary protects you from those things that would come to harm you, that could potentially harm you. And I think this is where, having that strong relationship with God, to have the wisdom to know where exactly these boundaries should be set. But it definitely is a part of your healing, and even wisdom as you grow further in knowing where those boundaries should be set, because then you don't repeat things over and over again. You don't get hurt in the same way over and over again.
Mm.
At some point you should be, growing, and with growing, hopefully healing and becoming more wise as you go along.
Absolutely. I agree with you. My gosh, it does help with all of that, with wisdom, and it helps you to grow and become more, like you said, more wise, and be able to understand when you have to say no, and when it's okay to say yes, because it's okay to say yes sometimes, but then it's also times where you have to say no. And actually, Matthew 5:37 tells us, but let your communication be yay, yay, nay, nay. It does tell us that. And so there are times when it's okay to say yes or no. Okay. All right. Another question I got for you. How can someone start setting boundaries if they've never done it before?
Yeah, I'll give you the tip of, like I said, like one first step is to simply look at your schedule. Look at what you have to do that week. I mean, even if it is, I think about stewardship too.
Mm.
Like stewarding your time, stewarding your energy, literal, like physical energy. How much energy do you have to put forth to these different tasks? But one way to do that is to look at your schedule and say, this is what I have to get done this week. I know I have Bible study on Tuesday night. I know I have young adults on Tuesday night. Understanding that you already have these things on your schedule. What realistically can you add? You also maybe have to cook dinner. You also get up and exercise. You also do, different things like this. You have to think about all of those things. And so the best way to do that is to look at what you already have going on. Definitely pray. Ask God. And we're praying continuously.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely asking God, where it looks like I could, give me some wisdom on where is the best place to set these boundaries. Is it, there's some things I still need to take off of my schedule. Like I just need to remove it. And so some of this is just seeing that this is here. It needs to be not on here anymore. I mean, setting boundaries within my own self is probably the first step. So looking at my schedule, this is my boundary, let that go. But also, I think we're thinking about it really in a way about like saying it in love. Like you're not gonna say no, get out of my face. you're still you're still telling people like no, but in a loving way, which, like I said, could be hard when people are like, well, dang, you never do anything. They come with the negative. But if you're speaking no in love, you could be firm, you could be truthful. Look, now I got 25 meetings on Tuesday. So
25 meetings, stick
I
around.
know.
But
Like, I know I do not have time to say this, so I shouldn't even give this person this false hope. Like, I'm going to try to make it work. I'm not. I have no energy after 3 of those meetings. So, there's no way I could give any more. Anyway, but it does help like protect relationships when you like, you can look with me. Like, I do not have time this day. I could give you 2 to 6 weeks. But I don't have time today. Do
right.
you wait those 2 to 6 weeks? Now it's on you whether you want to wait. I
Mm,
think definitely in focusing on like personal responsibility. So it's about guarding your own heart, and we see that in the Bible. Your
mhm.
actions. You're not forcing other people to change. Like I am setting this for myself. Like again, if you need to look at this calendar with me, that's fine too. But it really puts like, no, I'm protecting my heart. I'm guarding my heart. I'm understanding that there's some things I should not do to myself. I just
Mm.
should not do this to myself. And then definitely prioritizing godly wisdom. Looking at what is the difference between helping others and then enabling your own destructive behavior. Like I said, like at what point is it? I mean, you could say no just to say no to practice, but also you're doing it because there is a real meaning. No, I really need to get this extra hour of sleep instead of getting up to do this for you today. So understanding and using God's wisdom to do the right thing at the right time. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and a lot of that comes with practice. It does.
Oh
It's
my
got
gosh.
to practice.
I'm telling you, you can get in the mirror and say stuff like you said. Use the mirror and just stand in the front of the mirror and say no. However many times that can be something encouraging to do, and just kind of help you even start practicing or start practicing on somebody at your house that you might feel comfortable to share that moment with. So, what is something encouraging that you want to leave to the viewers today?
I would say, this is a maybe a cliche thing we've heard before, but self-care is not selfish. So there's no guilt needed to set boundaries. As we talked about, God is a God of boundaries, and boundaries are not just for keeping people out, it's for protection. But it also helps you, stay in your lane. It helps you, keep up with things that are already on your plate. And I'll say you could do it. You could do it. Start small. Say no to this few things. Like you said, say no in the mirror. Say no to yourself. Deny yourself certain things. Have some self control about it. And then it does become easier, especially when it's things that are just like draining you or things that are draining your day and your schedule. You can more easily identify that. And prayer is always good. And like I said, we're praying always. But I mean, even starting your morning by saying, Lord, today help me, understand which boundaries I need to set. And before you know it, you'll look up, you'll be so peaceful. Your boundaries will be so clear. And it won't be a hard thing. It won't be a mean thing. It definitely will protect you, protect your heart, in all these ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are so thankful that you were with us today, Carmen. You have been a blessing to me and many others that were viewing. And we also want to thank you all for joining us today for this boundaries edition of I'm Ready to Talk. And so, if this conversation hit home for you, I want you to remember that boundaries are not a sign that you don't love people. It is not. But they may be a sign that you're finally learning how to love wisely. And so protecting your peace does not make you a bad person. It may be a part of your healing. So don't forget to do those practical things to start that journey of healing and beginning to have those boundaries set. And also, don't forget to subscribe and share with someone else who may need this encouragement. We'll see you next time. every person listening today. Thank you for meeting us in honest places, healing broken places, and reminding us that we are not alone. Let this conversation continue to produce peace, wisdom, healing, and hope. In Jesus' name, amen. Until next time, keep healing, keep hoping, and keep talking.